Hey everybody, Tim Albrick here, and welcome to this week's episode of the Ask a YFP CFP segment of the Your Financial Pharmacist Podcast, where we feature questions from you, the YFP community, to be answered by one of YFP Planning's fee-only certified financial planners. Before we jump into today's question, I will give a shout out to YFP Planning's incredible team that makes this segment possible. YFP Planning offers fee-only comprehensive financial planning services that are customized to the pharmacy professional. You can learn more and book a free discovery call by visiting yfpplanning.com. Again, that's yfpplanning.com. Okay, this week's question comes from David up in Michigan.
Hey, this is David Bright, co-host of the YFP Real Estate Investing Podcast. As I've shared on the YFP REI podcast previously, I'm still buying rental properties in this hot market, but with mortgage rates going up in recent months, I'm increasingly tempted to look at adjustable rate mortgage options instead of traditional 30-year fixed rate mortgages. In my market, I'm seeing interest rates roughly 100 basis points or 1 full percentage point lower on adjustable rate mortgages versus fixed rate mortgages right now. Because I don't plan to keep my most recent rental property acquisition for more than 5 to 7 years, and because I'm also looking for a little buffer in case I want to keep it a little longer, I'm tempted by a 10-6 ARM loan option. The quick math shows that I could save thousands in interest during those first 10 years before the rate adjusts, and I'm sure that many of us that bought a house in or around the 2008 recession probably have ugly memories of these ARM loans, but knowing that others are probably seeing similar comparisons of ARM versus fixed rate mortgage options for both investment and primary residences right now, I'd love to hear what the team at YFP Planning thinks about adjustable rate mortgages in 2022. Thanks so much.
Thank you, David, for submitting your question to be featured on this week's Ask a YFP CFP segment. Tim Baker, we know this guy. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I guess just to unpack the question a little bit more. So, David mentions the 10 and 6 ARM. So basically, this is an adjustable rate mortgage where it has a fixed interest rate for the first 10 years of the loan. And then after that, the interest rate will adjust every 6 months over the remaining 20 years. So 30 years in total, but the adjustable rate kicks in after the first 10 and then basically a semi-annual adjustment. And usually it's aligned with the LIBOR index, I believe. I think it goes back to, risk in a way, taking some intelligent risks. Some people would say if you're invested in real estate directly, you probably have more of an appetite for risk because of the swings associated with the market, with the real estate market. I think you can, some people would argue that, some real estate investors would argue that. With most people, I think default to a fixed rate where you're paying a little bit more on the rate because you're paying for that known quantity. I know that when I lock in 4% for 30 years, I'm paying 4% for 30 years, So if I'm doing an ARM, I don't know what I'm paying after those first 10 years. Mm-hmm. Now there could be some caps associated with, so it doesn't swing too much, to my detriment, but people don't like unknowns. So I personally like it because I think you're saving money on the rate, Tim, and you're kind of thinking of your exit strategy, which a lot of people don't think of their exit strategy if they're thinking about a primary house. But if I think the longest I've ever been in a house is 7 years. Mm-hmm. I think the average nationally is 8. So you could argue that mathematically I made the wrong decision when I purchased, that house and sold after 7 years. I probably should have looked at an ARM. But for me, I wasn't really, I didn't know there was that unknown quantity that maybe I was going to live there for the rest of my life. But, I think with a real estate investor in particular, and maybe even like a primary home, if you're buying your primary home and this isn't your dream home, maybe you look at an ARM to potentially save a little bit on interest rates, and we're feeling a little bit of the crunch. Obviously, rates have gone up, but they're still close to historical lows. But when you go from potentially in the 2s to now in the 5s and the 6s, like you feel that. So I think it's a great thing to look at. I think you have to understand actually what you're signing up for and understand the risk. And I know David does. So I think, if I'm working with a client like David, I would just want to make sure that they understand that, there is a potential for the rate to go up. There's a potential for the rate to go down, but there could be a decision, 10 years out. And, it could be that when you are going to make a move on that, the home could be underwater. That house that I bought, that first house that I bought right around the 08, 09, housing crisis, I think I bought it and then the market crashed. It was underwater for a little bit of time, which wasn't a big deal because I wasn't going anywhere. But if you're trying to, rent it or sell it, that could be problematic. So all in all, I think ARMs are a good tool to use, especially if you understand what you're getting into, and especially if it aligns with, David is saying 5 to 7 years. He's given himself 10, so a little bit of a buffer. I think it'd be a way to make your debt service a little bit more efficient versus, paying more of a rate for a known quality in the fix. So, I think it's another tool to potentially reach for to make your financial plan even more efficient.
Yeah, this is interesting because this wasn't perhaps the same question a year or two ago, right? Based on where rates are at. And so I think an interesting question that gets to the strategy based on some of the time that we're in. And I would just echo what you said. I think risk tolerance is an important factor. I think, understanding the product and how it works. The other thought I had here, and I know David said no more than 5 to 7 years, but as you're running the deal analysis math on a property, obviously if the rate bumps up, and you could put in some assumptions of what a rate might be, is how do the numbers look different month to month on the cash flow? How do you feel about that?
Yeah.
How much cushion is there? And, I know David's doing those numbers because he created the deal analysis spreadsheet that we have on YFPrealestate.com. But, I think that's another thing, especially for folks that maybe this is the first or second property and may or may not be comfortable with some of that. I think it's worth evaluating the risk and seeing how the numbers stack up. So David, really appreciate you taking time. And for folks who don't know, David is the co-host of the YFP Real Estate Investing Podcast, which is published each Saturday morning. I would point folks to YFPrealestate.com. From there, you can get to the podcast, real estate resources for pharmacy. They've got a couple guides. They have a deal analysis spreadsheet, and you can get more information about the YFP Real Estate Investing Facebook group as well. So David, again, thank you. We'll be sending you not your first, maybe not your second, but your third YFP t-shirt. And for folks that would like to have their question featured on an upcoming episode, you can do that by sending us an email, info@yourfinancialpharmacist.com, or you can record your question by visiting yourfinancialpharmacist.com/ask-YFP. As we wrap up this week's episode, an important reminder that the content in this podcast is provided for informational purposes only and is not intended to provide and should not be relied on for investment or any other advice. For more information on that, you can visit yourfinancialpharmacist.com/disclaimer. Thanks so much for joining us. Have a great rest of your week.